When elders fail, the church fails. And when the church fails, the nation falls. Elders in these days need to address an historical problem. What do I mean by this? Well, if you've studied the history of the Western Church for quite some time, with respect to its understanding about Christianity and the political realm, you would have noticed that the majority consensus has been that Christianity and politics are like water and oil. They do not and they ought not to mix. Which means that the salt and light of God's word has not been vigorously applied to the political realm, and thus darkness has flourished. Another problem or obstacle that elders need to address is the misunderstanding of Romans 13. Even the Zimbabwean tyrant Robert Mugabe used the misunderstanding of Romans 13 to keep the church subjugated under his boot. There is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are ordained of God. Therefore, he who resists the authority resists the ordinance of God. Therefore, I'm untouchable, right? Romans 13, 1 and 2. That's how Mugabe used it. He smugly quoted these verses while he literally fulfilled George Orwell's vision of the future in his book 1984, which is a boot stamping on a human face forever. Romans 13 gives legitimacy to government. It shows us what God has ordained them to be. But people don't ask the question, unto what end did God ordain government? And Romans 13 answers that question itself. It's for the good of the people. That ordained authority is God's minister, diakonos, God's servant to the people for good. And again it repeats, it is God's servant, diakonos, to carry out vengeance against him who practices evil. That's what God ordained governmental authority to be and to do. And servants do not have the right to choose what they are going to do on their own. Even Adam and Eve, in their state of perfection, were not allowed to determine or define good and evil for themselves. So how ridiculous is the suggestion that God ordained this structure, this government, whereby he set up sinful humans and gave them authority to define good and evil for themselves. And no matter how depraved their definitions were, it would be sinful to resist their despotism. God not only ordained the governmental structures, he also ordained the responsibilities that those structures have to follow. And there's no time to go into too many of those details. But they are bound to those structures. They are not a law unto themselves. God did not give them a blank check. Only God is allowed to define right and wrong. And everyone who contradicts his definition of right and wrong is at war with his kingdom.